to the MTR Network. The doctor here with some friends, some you know, some that are new voices to our network. We have Ashanti. We all know Ashanti, my partner in crime from one of my partners in crime from DocuDrunks. Say hi.
Hi.
And we have friend of the show, Ty.
Hello, how you doing?
Good. And we have another friend of the show, Ejiro, who is also a contributor to our friends over at Project Fandom.
Hello, everyone.
And we are here because the four of us have been talking on and on and on and on about The Crown. We got started talking about it at the back end of the Alien versus Predator Requiem discussion, just because it was a better discussion than that actual movie was. And so we decided to get together and have a talk about this show, which you may not want to watch, but we strongly encourage you to watch. It is the only show that is 100% white shenanigans that I would encourage, because it's 100% white British shenanigans. And one of the reasons I asked Ejiro to join us is because she currently lives in the UK. And so I wanted to get her perspective as someone on the ground, quote unquote, with regards to the show. But before we started, I wanted to play a clip from the show that I feel really, in our discussion, highlights what this entire series is about. It is the speech, it's the voiceover of Queen Mary, who is Queen Elizabeth's grandmother, talking to her as she ascends the throne following the death of her father, King George. So I'm going to go ahead and play that for us.
Dearest Lilibet, I know how you loved your papa, my son. And I know you will be as devastated as I am by this loss. But you must put those sentiments to one side now, for duty calls. The grief for your father's death will be felt far and wide. Your people will need your strength and leadership. I have seen 3 great monarchies brought down through their failure to separate personal indulgences from duty. You must not allow yourself to make similar mistakes. And while you mourn your father, you must also mourn someone else. Elizabeth Mountbatten. For she has now been replaced by another person, Elizabeth Regina. The two Elizabeths will frequently be in conflict with one another. The fact is, the crown must win. Must always win.
Ready, ma'am.
Okay, so that is the scene that I was talking about when we were in our group, talking about where Queen Mary tells her and tells the audience, this is what this show's about to be about, so buckle up. What were your thoughts on the series? Well, season 1. We're just talking about season 1 right now. And what were your thoughts about Mary's speech as it relates to season 1?
I thought it was prescient. And talk about setting up the whole season. It's almost like Queen Elizabeth memorized that letter. And I think I admire her more and more as the season progresses. But I thought it was instructive because you kind of see the loneliness, but also how everyone else kind of assumes that because she's the one in the position that that she's oh, hold on, sorry, I forgot I lost my train of thought. Next, come back around to me.
Okay. Ejiro, what did you think?
I think it was perfect, but it's one of those things where you get advice from someone and you're looking at them and you're thinking, no, it couldn't possibly be that way. And you kind of seen it dawn on her every episode. It begins to click even more. So by the time you get to the end of season 1, she understands the full weight of it. I really, because I'm always like, is that true? Did that happen in real life, or were they using it for the show? But if it's true or not, it was perfect, because I believe that a grandmother in her grandmother's position would advise her granddaughter like that. It was perfect. Yeah, and I think it was set up properly for the audience as well to understand what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Ty? What do you think?
I loved the series, and that letter encapsulated everything that I think you as an audience member needs to know, but also it's something that Queen Elizabeth kept reminding people over and over again, especially Margaret and Philip. And she kept reminding them that in this role as sovereign, it's the monarchy. It's not the monarch. And that was something that she said at least in 4 or 5 episodes. And Queen Mary was just one of my favorite characters in season 1. She knows how to put some words together that just made me cackle and holler and testify in the same moment.
Well, the funny thing about it was that I don't think it was, like you said, it was sinking in as the season wore on, but I think it finally hit home when it came time for her to release Margaret to marry Peter. Like when they waited all that time, he went away, and then it came back to her like, as much as your sister, I would love to say yes. As your monarch and head of the Church of England, I cannot say yes.
Yeah. And also when Elizabeth goes on the tour, the Commonwealth tour, and she comes back after Margaret has pulled her shenanigans. And as I think Vanity Fair called Margaret a glorious mess, she was a glorious mess during Elizabeth's time away. And she reminded her, girl, you were shining, and the monarchy should shine, not the monarch. And this was one thing Margaret I don't think she ever really got, or at least they haven't shown us that yet, especially not in season 1.
I don't know that based on what happened to Margaret in the end. I mean, you look at the Queen Mother, and she was 101 when she died, and Elizabeth's here 92. Margaret died when she was 70. And
because all the drinking,
and the smoking and the partying, she lived a hard life. She liked the wealth that came with being part of the monarchy. She didn't like all the trappings of the monarchy, but she couldn't part with the wealthy part. She couldn't just go live her life as a commoner.
Well, she also loved attention, right? And not attention in the way that a monarch should have attention. She was definitely, I want attention my way. I have character. Like later on in season 1, she takes these really massive digs at Elizabeth, saying, I have character and you don't. And I just thought, oh, wow, those are fighting words, girl.
She was super harsh.
She was like, I was daddy's favorite. I was like, ooh.
What was it, her?
Could you blame her?
You were
like, Prince Philip called that shit out, and then not 2 minutes later, Princess Margaret did the same thing.
Well, what was the line? She was like, because Elizabeth was like, we were his pride and joy, and she's like, no, you were his pride, but
you were his pride. But yes,
I was his
joy.
Yep.
I was his joy. And I was
the one part that I guess they must have edited out, but I could have sworn Margaret said "bitch" at the end of that. there was a very piercing British upper crust bitch inside that pregnant pause. That was cut from the final while this thing was being edited.
Her eyes said it. Her body language said it. And Elizabeth just sat there like, you're right, but I'm still the queen.
Right.
But I don't think Margaret she in no way was jealous of her sister. I think what ended up happening was because she couldn't marry Peter, she decided to escalate. I mean, she was always a partier anyway, the way she's portrayed in real life. But it was to say that, well, I don't want to be queen. You got that. What I want is to be with the person I want to be with. Since I can't have that, I'm going to make this really hard on you. So it was very rebellious, but quite understandable in a way. I mean, Margaret is one of my favorite characters on the show, I have
You know what? Margaret is like my least favorite character. The only thing I like about her are her clothes.
Okay, so we're going to stop there. Tell us more, Ashanti. Tell us more.
Yeah, I don't really fuck with Margaret. And that's because like she's really, really petty, and she's only petty because she really has nothing else going for her. Like, it's coming from like such a place of powerlessness that anytime she can like get back at her sister for like some slight that she perceives that she did, I was like, it was super uncalled for. And I think season 1, I liked her, a little bit more because like who couldn't identify, or well, who couldn't at least sympathize with her wanting to like marry the person that she loved. But especially as we get into like season 2, I was like, oh, this bitch is trash.
We'll get to season 2 in our next podcast because not everyone's caught up on season 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
second season, I'll have more to say on Margaret, but you can see the self-indulgent, like arrogant, you might have been Papa's pride, but I'm his joy. So boo-hoo. But the dude is still dead and you still don't have a job.
And you can't even
right. And you can't even do that when your sister asks you to. And you have like the most freedom out of everyone. And actually, Princess Margaret and Prince Philip kind of pissed me. Actually, no, they both piss me off at times. And it's because they're like unreasonable. Okay. And it's like they can't, like they're the most rebellious. They're the ones, they live more life than Queen Elizabeth lives life. And I think that was like totally unfair because there's stuff that she cannot do by virtue of her upbringing, but also like just because of her job. Like she just can't go out and hang out at all times of the night, but Prince Philip can. Like he can go wild out, show his ass, and she's at home getting a good night's sleep, getting ready for her boxes the next day. Right. I don't know. I felt more sympathy for her because it's like no one could really put themselves in her shoes to understand that she's basically just a walking mannequin.
Well, think about it. And that, okay, so let's rewind because I'm sorry, I'm going to make some really loud noise real quick. Okay. What you just described also made me mad at the beginning of season 1, right? Well, you have the monarch. Let's start with George. I'm just going to start with George. George is sick. George clearly has lung cancer. No one is telling George about his state. They pulled a whole ass lung out of his body and it was black as tar. And then when they went in, realized that it had spread to his other lung. They did not tell him. The government knew before George knew that George was dying. That's insane. That is absolutely insane.
And here's the thing about that. Because it's all right. I'm kind of a history nut, but this is actually quite typical. And it's really messed up. And I understand what I'm about to say is really messed up, but it's kind of like the government needs to know the king before the king knows the king, because they're the ones that actually move government. Like they're the ones that has to do the most maneuvering should something happen to him. Mm-hmm. So like it's, on a human level, it's fucked up, but as the embodiment of a whole nation state, they have other considerations.
Right.
And it's kind of like, didn't Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, say that they were all marionettes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what that is. The government has, they respect the institution, but they also respect it as like a piece of, you know, I don't want to say furniture, but it's a piece. It's a piece on their chessboard. So they have to figure out the moves.
Exactly.
But I think that changes. That begins to change. Well, we'll talk about season 2, and we can even, as we progress even to now, how you see the royal family is completely different than it was. But the people don't like that. So the government might have liked that, but the people themselves want the royalty to be real and to have some emotions and to show that they're human beings. So it served a purpose, as you're right, Ashanti, for like a great deal of history. But modern day, you can't be that kind of royal. You have to be more in touch and know more about yourself and be less of a marionette, I'd say, and more of, I wouldn't say a partner because the government is still in control, but to have some more agency. Because
that's been a shift, and which is, and actually, this is why I'm glad that they're doing this, because Queen Elizabeth's reign is like the longest, like it pretty much typifies the entire 20th century. And we've seen how society has changed, and this institution that is kind of like stationary is being forced to make just little, incremental shifts towards modernity. But think about it, at the time, there was a completely different reverence to royalty than exists today. So, like, there's a, I guess, impulse to protect the institution, but also not to show too much. Like, as Churchill said, it's not to let too much light shine in on the magic, because then you ruin the illusion.
Yes. But I think
so. There's always been like the separation. There's always been this kind of elevation of them as, sort of God-like. Like, you don't want them to be accessible. Like, they need to be separate and apart from, like, they need to be fairy tale-like. But over the course of the decades, that has started to crumble away, just as people's respect and deference towards a, godlike monarchy has chipped away, because we want to see them as more of a reflection of us. But that used to not be the case.
So I think the one thing I want to say is that I never want to talk about how great Philip is, because I don't really like Philip, but he have the right impulse when this all began, right? One of the things that he keeps trying to get Elizabeth to understand throughout season 1 is that she has to embrace that, yes, I'm the monarch, but the world around me is changing, right? So Philip does have some really great ideas, such as televising the coronation, right? And that does a lot to bring the monarchy into is carried over again in season 2. But I agree that Elizabeth has a really tough job. She's supposed to be touched by divinity, yet one of us. And that's a really tough role for anyone to take on. And she's a woman, right? So she's battling with trying to maintain the way she understands a married relationship should happen and how she has deference to her husband. But at the same time, she's the monarch. So there's this big battle that happens regarding her carrying Philip's made-up last name, right? And that becomes a big thing for them.
And you know what? To piggyback, let's talk about her other marriage to the government, because they were keeping shit from her.
Oh, the shit! Yeah. And when she called them out, they just looked.
Oh my God!
I was so proud of her. Okay, yes. First of all, I was proud of Elizabeth for
that's why. And here's the thing: I wish. And going back to my first point about how the government kind of considers, I guess, the monarch secondary to, how they move. Mm-hmm. I'm glad she did that shit, because I'm not going to be the head of y'all and you not tell me what's going on. Like, I kind of wish her daddy had that, because I need to know. So I have the right and the need to know. first and foremost. So yeah, I'm glad she stepped up.
First of all, I was so proud of her for figuring out, like, I'm dumb as hell because of how they taught me. Let me educate myself. Let me get some knowledge so at least I know what I'm talking about.
I just spit out my drink.
Oh, sorry.
That was hilarious. She was dumb as hell. You're not wrong.
She didn't know anything, and she recognized it. Like, she started reading, like, I am dumb as a bag of rocks. Let me figure this shit out. So I'm proud of her. But the way she did it was so classy. Like, you know, when she was telling, oh, no, that was season 2. Shit. There was a great line in season 2. I'm just going to spoil it real quick. It's the beginning of season 2 where she calls out Eden for the whole Panama Canal deal. Where she's like, you know what, we may make mistakes, but we can't walk away from them.
Suez
Canal, thank you. We can't just walk away from our mistakes. We all have to pay for the choices that we make. We can't just run away from them. I mean, and she did that slowly during season 1, calling people out like, okay, don't keep shit from me. You've been sitting up here having strokes, Winston, and no one thought to tell me. Don't y'all ever, in her classy royal way, don't you ever in your life do that shit no more. I was like,
and she even went to her mother. She even told her mother off for not getting them educated. She was like, how are you going to have me be queen and I'm dumb? What was that about?
I hate you. I hate you so much right now.
But she did. And her mother was like, that's not my fault. They told me.
Here's the thing, like she had a governess, which was typical, but they also brought in, like, she had a teacher who taught at Eton. She had someone that, someone from like the Church of England. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't think they really considered it because it was not everything. None of that was anything that she needed to know to do her job.
They didn't know she was going to be queen. There was no telling that they needed that. So there was no way at that time that a princess would need more education beyond, the old school, lower little language.
Like royal children were not as well educated as people presume that they were. Like this current generation of royals, and when I mean royals, I really mean Kate and William and Prince Prince Edward, the Count of Wessex or whatnot. They all have degrees. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then Meghan Markle, who's about to join the party. So and Prince Charles, though he went to like Cambridge or Oxford, but he didn't get a degree because it was kind of looked down upon in a really weird way. Like Prince of Wales have attended college before, but they just never got the degree. They just took classes because they would actually have to pass things and to earn that. And yeah, they have a strange way of dealing with things. But
we ain't British citizens. Just say it. Just say it. We ain't British citizens. What? Just say it. They stupid. No, I'm sorry. I'm joking. I'm joking. I listened to I don't know if I shared it with you guys, but I shared it somewhere else. Prince Harry did a series of guest podcasts for BBC Player. And he interviewed.
Oh yeah, I watched.
Barack. He also interviewed.
I love Prince Harry.
Yeah. He also interviewed his father, and they were talking about climate change. So even though he didn't finish school, he has. It seems like he's taking it upon himself to educate himself in other ways, which I'm really glad for. So
the man owns a whole organic company and is amazing. He pushes for a lot of farming in a lot of areas, Prince Royal, all these things. So he's educated himself along the way,
which is good.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like especially with so Queen Victoria famously didn't give her Prince of Wales, like Edward VII, anything to do. Like she didn't fuck with her own heir so much that even when she was out of commission and she just didn't do shit for like several decades, like she didn't even let him do like her boxes or anything like that. So when he became king, it's kind of strange because he did the same thing a little bit with Edward VIII, who abdicated, but Edward VIII started to carve things out for himself. which is what Prince Charles had to do, because it's kind of like you have to make things up as you go to give yourself purpose, but also doesn't detract from the role of the monarchy, which is a pretty hard thing to do. But going back.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ashanti. I was going to say that brings us back to something that Margaret said. Margaret begged for a role, like in season 1. She has, after she got her hand slapped, she said, if I just had a role, if I just had something that I knew how to do or was supposed to do, that would be excellent for me.
And that also shows a weird lack of in initiative. It shows a lack of initiative and imagination.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm going to have to defend her for a second. And again, as the show progresses, you see that. Because in her life, she ended up being like a patron of a lot of really forward-thinking organizations, including HIV and AIDS research. So I think that that's part of her acting out, is to say, look, you have a role. I just want to do what I want to do. But since you're not going to let me do this major thing like marry this man, I'm going to go wild out. So I think it was her way of kind of getting to herself. That is have a sort of rebellious, stubborn, stuck up, obnoxious, privileged aspect to it. But it was her way to find herself.
And it's possible, I was going to say, it's possible that they'll address her finally finding herself in season 3 when they age her up.
Yeah, Helena Bonham Carter. That'll be great.
Now, is that confirmed that she's going to be Margaret? Is that confirmed?
I just read it. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's confirmed.
You know what I hate? Okay, so Claire Foy and Matt Smith. You know what? The first time I ever saw Matt Smith was as the 11th Doctor, and I did not expect to see the 11th Doctor's ass, but when I did, I was like, hello, nurse. Anyway, let me tell you something. They did really good jobs, to the point where I'm like, can't we just apply makeup to them and let them age them that way, and they continue to be in these roles?
Yeah, I actually watched a couple of interviews of them, and so they were only contracted to do two seasons, because they're going to have other actors to come in as Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles, and then as they all age. So, it's a shame. It's kind of a loss, but it also leaves room open. Like, they did such a good job that the next pair of actors really can't fuck up, because we're protective with these people now.
Right.
Have they named Philip? Because I know they've named Olivia Colman as picking up for Queen Elizabeth, which is going to be amazing because she's superb.
Mm-hmm.
That I do not know.
Okay. I'm curious to see.
So you telling me that means I don't have to worry about Elizabeth, because
Helena Bonham Carter is going to play Margaret.
Yeah, then Olivia. I think there was some talk of David Tennant, but those are rumors are not confirmed.
That's definitely that's people in the Whoniverse just trying to put all the doctors in that role. There's no way that Matt Smith ages into David Tennant short of a Doctor Who regeneration. That just does not work. I'm sorry. No.
But so it's interesting that it feels like the only person who does have a role within the universe of the monarch, besides the courtiers and the private secretary, is the monarch, because the Queen Mom complained that she didn't have a role, that she went from being queen to just not knowing what to do.
Yeah, so she went on that kind of, walkabout in Scotland and bought a house.
Yeah, and bought a castle.
Yeah, and that's also because, because especially for her, her role was tied to her husband's life. So, and you saw that when she went farther down the order of precedence. And it's just the way that things were. And actually, because of, honey, she went through World War II. Mm-hmm. Buckingham Palace got bombed. Yes. They stayed in London and went back and forth between that and Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. I'm like, girl, you deserve to retire and chill. No one would blame you if you just wanted to retire. But I guess
Just sit by the
it's a
Scottish
lifelong
coast.
thing.
Yeah, and I think that she wanted some space for herself, but also at the same time, she really wanted to help Elizabeth because she said, this girl who's just not ready to handle these responsibilities.
Yes.
Yeah,
Do you
but
guys feel
she's
like everyone
a blood princess or a blood royal, as it were, and her mother is not. So that's also the thing that it kind of put some distance between that. Like people would rather see the fruit of King George VI than his wife.
Exactly, which is really sad.
Yeah.
Okay, so am I the only one who, and we're jumping around and it's cool. First watch, I really enjoyed it. I loved the guy who, I forget his name off the top of my head now. The guy who played King George, he was a major player in Fringe. I've seen him in some other stuff. But my second watch, I cried when he passed away. I cried in his interactions with people. And I was shocked because the first time I watched it, it didn't hit me like that. But the second time, I'm like, holy shit, this guy is good.
Yeah, that hurt. He did such a good job. And let me find his name.
Jared Harris.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. And also shout out to excuse me, John Lithgow pulling off Winston Churchill. Man, listen.
That episode.
Ejiro and I were talking about that. Yes, that he did an excellent job. I will tell you, episode 2, when King George dies and Winston Churchill delivers that speech.
Yes.
Did you see how Anthony Eaton looks sick in the fucking face?
Oh, he was broken.
That episode, I could watch it on repeat forever for the rest of my life and be perfectly fine. There was a gloriousness to that speech. I have it memorized, by the way, but yeah.
You want to bust it out for us real quick?
No. I don't want to do that.
Oh, and the episode about the fog where the little girl got killed.
That was so good.
Okay, the first time I watched, I'm like, holy shit, they ran her over with a bus. I didn't see that coming. Oh,
with a double decker, ran her over.
Holy cow. And how, I hate to say it, I was like, oh, Winston, you too good, but you despicable, but you good. You use this shit to get out of being in trouble for this because this entire situation is your fault. This is your fault. You didn't listen to them the first time this shit happened and put the money in to make sure it wouldn't happen again. And you sure turned this around in the midst of it. How? Oh, he was too good. He was too good.
He was very good. I mean, because he was about to get fired, and he knew it.
He knew it. She called him there to say, you need to step the fuck down. This is your fault.
Right.
But that's why he lasted so long. Like, no one lasted as long as Winston Churchill, back and forth, in and out of office as prime minister.
He knew how to
so
play the
skilled.
Game. He knew how to play the game. Philip. We got to talk about Philip, whose dick is not anybody's friend.
Now, we're talking season 1 Philip, not season 2
This is
Philip,
season
right?
1 Philip with his Thursday supper club.
Yeah. Oh, God. I cannot wait to chop down season 2 Philip.
Yes.
Season two made me actually feel a little bit different towards Philip than season 1 did, actually.
Really?
Season one Philip was annoying. Season 2 Philip was a dick. He pissed me all the way the fuck off, but we'll get to that when we talk about season 2.
Yeah, but I hated him in both seasons, so I felt the same way. Like,
okay, so here's
guys about. Ugh.
Okay, so
are we going to talk about Uncle Mountbatten? Because I love Greg Wisely.
Right, I was about to talk about
Uncle Mountbatten wasn't shit.
Okay, no. I was going to talk about that. So here's the thing. I get, Philip is young and dumb. Philip started courting Elizabeth when she was 13. So side-eye you, 18-year-old serviceman courting a 13-year-old, but that's a whole other story. I know there's historical precedents and all that bullshit. It's still gross. Anyway, So I get that Philip wanted to find. I feel like Philip marrying into Elizabeth's family was a way to establish his family name, obviously, and to bring some legitimacy back to a family that had been tarnished by the Nazi Empire. But it was like, still, dude, do your fucking research. You're old enough to know what you're marrying into, especially because by the time you married her, she was already in line for the throne. So there's no surprises here. There were no male children, so the woman you was marrying was going to be monarch. You need to figure out what the fuck that means and decide if you're in. And he didn't. And then
he was acting brand new.
He didn't, and then got mad when it went the way it did. Well, I always got to come second to you, bitch. Yes, because I'm the queen, and you are a duke. You're not a prince. You're not a king.
And I made you that duke. I made you that.
Right. You are my consort. You fuck me and produce the royal heirs. That is your job.
Yeah. And Prince Philip is quoted as, famously quoted as having said, they think I'm a bloody amoeba. I was like, yeah.
Well, to be fair, you're a sperm factory. I just need the heirs. No, I'm sorry. That was rude. But I don't care.
But he is a bloody amoeba. But yeah, Blanche, yeah. So.
The thing is, what I tried to understand, is that this was a plan from, Uncle Mountbatten, who was very close to, not Victoria, Elizabeth as well. So it worked for both sides. But as you said, if you know what your role is, play your position. And I just felt like perhaps Uncle Mountbatten could have done a better job in preparing him for it, as we see him trying to do with Philip later. With, goodness.
But Uncle Mountbatten, what bothered me about him was like this arrogant sense of entitlement of that he was coming for, that he was trying to like take over like the Windsor family. And he did it like stridently so. Like he wanted to put his name on the royal house, and I don't really think he gave a consideration to why the family are the Windsors. And also because that was a somewhat recent change, why they wanted to keep it that way instead of putting another man's, name on the royal house, because there was already too much history established. Like the name was changed from Saxe Coburg Gotha yada 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 during World War I, and they wanted to keep it that way to distance themselves from their Germanic heritage as much as possible, and then to marry this, have this man marry and was going to break that continuity. And if there is one thing the monarchy is about, it is continuity.
But what isn't Lord Mountbatten a relative somehow of Victoria? Wasn't one of his parents a grandchild or something Victoria? So they're all in the same family.
Related.
Exactly.
So but he was also like the viceroy of India. He oversaw the partition of India and Pakistan that went disastrously
wrong.
Yes. And so
didn't they blame him for losing India?
Yes,
basically.
Well, that was already in the works, because the empire stepped up during World War I, and as World War II was going on, like the now Commonwealth countries were like, yeah, so we're going to want our freedom after this bullshit. And so it was after World War II that you saw a lot of the decolonization happen and former empire countries turning in self-declarizing and becoming independent states. So, yeah, that happened all after World War II. So, like, you have alongside this whole story that we're witnessing, the like major political events happening is us seeing the breakdown of the empire. And I actually kind of think it was really perfectly handled in the episode when Winston Churchill was getting his portrait done.
Yeah.
And the guy was talking about how, like, your you're tired, like you're sick, you've seen some shit, it's time to, let go and move on. Like you're kind of a different age now. And that's kind of what the relationship to Britain's former colonies were. And or at least how Britain was starting to view and see herself. Like you see them trying to fake the funk, and Prince Philip called this out towards the end of the season, talking about I'm not getting measured for a uniform, getting measured for a freaking costume to go on this pageant. So, right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's beautiful how it ended up going into that. That's the last episode, like Gloriana.
Yeah, Gloriana.
Start to see what's about to kick off in Egypt. And I love the way you described it, because that was a big thing for Elizabeth. Now the empire has completely shifted.
Right, it's diminishing.
Completely. And
so
they're trying
as
to
your
hold on
empire
to
is
it.
diminishing, because, so you know what? King George VI was the last emperor of anything.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
The Queen Victoria was made the Empress of India. And it was kind of like a G move, because her eldest daughter, Vicky, was about to become like an empress or something in her own right through marriage. And she was like, so what we're not going to have happen is my daughter outrank me. So the government was like, okay, so we're going to make you Empress of India. And there you go.
That's some petty shit.
She's stepping.
That's a false move. I ain't mad at her.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to be interested in seeing.
I really wish, I just kind of want, like the whole subtext of The Crown could be, bitch, I'm the female king. Listen to me. Do what I say.
Well, and it's interesting, too, that now the line of succession had been changed during Elizabeth's reign, that it's no longer the firstborn male heir that inherits the throne. It's the firstborn child. So technically, had Charlotte been born before George to William and Kate, she'd be in line for the throne and not George.
Yeah, because there are no surviving male. Yeah, so she was the last born under the rule of primogeniture. Mm-hmm. So, it's good that stuff is breaking down.
Yeah.
Who's buzzing?
Oh, that's
not me, do I?
No, that's not you. It's Ejiro. She's working on her. Other thoughts about season 1? I'm trying to think. There was something. Okay, she muted herself. There was something. What was it? Do you guys have other thoughts? There was something, but I need to think, so I'm going to let you fill the time while I'm thinking about what it was that stuck out for me about season 1.
What stuck out for me was...
Edward. How have we not talked about Edward?
That's what I was going to
Nigga.
Oh, my God. How have we not talked about Edward's stank ass? And Wallace's stank ass?
But is Edward stank? I mean...
Edward is stank.
Yes. Yes,
it's one thing to abdicate the throne to marry the person you love. I can respect that. But the way he talks shit about the family, because he can, for years, I mean, mind you, he abdicated when Elizabeth was a child. And you are still, I'm sorry, he abdicated when Elizabeth was a child. Here she is, a grown-ass woman with children, and you still bitching and whining about having to abdicate your throne to marry your side piece. Why? Why are you still whining? You made your choice. And they paid you for your choice.
He wasn't married, so technically she wasn't his side. He was her side piece.
I know.
Okay, but can we also talk about, and they didn't show this too much in season 1, but he's really aligned himself, especially through Wallace, with the Germans?
Well, I think this is something that, we'll talk about season 2. There was some embellishment. But the family...
There was some serious... Actually, there was a little bit of embellishment. There was also...
whitewashing.
They left some other shit out as well. that implicates a few more members of the royal family.
Thank you. That's what I was just about to say. They were all sort of aligned with Germany up into a point. So let's not
because
put it all
they
on
were
that
all fucking German until World War One, just before it was over.
Agreed.
Like, and you know what? Here's another fascinating thing. So I was listening to Claire Foy and Michael Smith talk about this, but they were asked a question about their accent because really their accent is kind of like a relic from an older time, but also really they're the only people that speak in that sort of tone, the nasally upper crust language. Like there's upper crust aristocratic and then there's the royals, and it's very, very few select people that still speak like this. And what they pointed out was some of the inflections and the pronunciations of words that they used, or maybe phrases or figures of speech, was due to them being Germanic to begin with.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they spoke German in the household at some point. So I mean, more recently.
Yes, and they're all, and it's not really made too much of today, but they're all multilingual. Not sure too much of the current generation, but I know Queen Elizabeth is also fluent in French. I'm not sure how much. Maybe she might be fluent in like Dutch or German. Yes. But Prince Philip definitely speaks German, Greek, French, and English. So, and Danish. Sorry. Or Dutch, sorry. Yeah.
Dutch, yeah. That's it. So they were very, and that's what the sort of irritated me a little bit is there should be no pretense. Edward, as annoying as he was doing what everyone else was doing at the time, which was to embrace their German heritage. He just didn't quite drop it on time. And then you saw the whole thing. Philip's family definitely embraced it to their,
yes, they did. Shit.
Philip's family.
Yeah. And actually a good deal of the aristocrats sympathize with Germans. Like the Churchills, like Sarah Spencer Churchill went over to, like one of Princess Diana's ancestors went over to Germany and went and partied with Nazi high command. And when war broke out, she shot herself in the fucking head.
What?
So because she wasn't smart, she did it wrong and survived. And so there's like actually footage of her coming back to the UK. There's a documentary I found. I'll search for it and I'll send it to you in the chat, y'all.
Okay.
But
was that the young lady that ended up dating that Italian the Italian industrialist who eventually was the head of Fiat?
I feel like she was. I feel that might be the one, if I remember.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think so.
I think it was Sarah Spencer Churchill.
Yeah, and Edward ain't shit, but Wallace really ain't shit.
Oh, fuck her. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I do agree with some of the stuff that he said about how she was treated. However, I will never forgive him for not even caring when his mother died. Like his letters back to Wallace when good old Queen Mary transitioned were just full of shame. And just
but you know what? I love the way
bars.
Right. I love the way though Elizabeth called him out like, "Oh, I didn't deserve an apology." You forget that you fucked me over when you decided to do what you did. It wasn't just your brother. It was me. My goal was to get married, have some babies, and live in the countryside. Now I got to deal with all this bullshit in everybody's lives when all I wanted to do was get married, have babies, and live in the countryside.
Yeah.
But could she have not been after, let's say, because he and Wallace never had kids, so let's say that he became king. She would have had to be queen. Would she have not after he died?
No, because of the divorce thing. As the head of the church.
I'm saying that if he did become king,
yes,
Elizabeth still would have become queen at some point. She would have been the next in line. because he and Wallace didn't have children.
But
so either way, she was going to have the job.
But he couldn't marry her as a divorcee and keep his position as king.
Right.
No, I know that. I'm saying that if this were, let's say those rules that we have today are there, that either way, she would have gotten the job.
But I think
the timing is, I'm saying.
Right.
Unless he had a child.
She said it was the timing.
Right.
She said it was the timing, though. Like, even when it happened, she told Philip, I'm sorry. I know we thought we had more time before this was the case.
Exactly.
So for her, she was like, okay, yeah, I'm next in line. But hey, I can pop out some kids, get at least one or two of them to adulthood before I have to deal with all this shit. She didn't know that the government and the doctors conspired to hide her father's pending death from them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what killed me about them, too, is that both him and Mary died of emphysema and lung cancer and steady smoking.
And Margaret,
I mean, once you know you're already gonna die,
But he didn't, though. And he knew smoking is what got his lung pulled in the first place. As soon it wasn't even a month after surgery, and he just puffing. I'm like, sir, you can't breathe. Why are you still smoking? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Well, he figured, okay, I already got 1 foot in. Might as well keep it going. I think people, smoking was, the fact that Queen Elizabeth herself doesn't smoke shows how much, she was not of the freaking culture, because smoking was the norm.
Mm-hmm. And she prevented Philip from smoking too. I mean, they got in a fight.
Whoa, that scene.
Yeah.
And she ran out the house, and those cameras there. Listen.
Oh, that was good.
I would have kept it behind too, just for the fun of it, and then got the film back. But so what's interesting though is I think that as beloved as the king was, I mean, I guess at no point was it Christmas, like his last Christmas, that he took Elizabeth under his wing and showed her a couple things.
Yeah, he showed her how the boxes worked and stuff like that.
Yeah, the box and a little bit of that. And
wasn't it after he found out that he didn't have long to live, he started doing that? I feel like it was after they finally told him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Saying, I just want to spend time with you. I was like, okay, well, you're going to get into and they didn't focus too much on it. So I guess you have to assume that he gave her as much information as she could, because then he sent her on that long ass Commonwealth tour. And the reason because she went on that tour, and when he passed away, they didn't have anything black. Every person in the royal family that travels abroad always has to pack a black outfit.
Oh, and her handmaiden apologized. She's like, I'm so sorry, I forgot. So
I hope that poor lady didn't lose her job, but I feel like she lost her job.
She lost her job. Tommy, petty ass, you know what? Petty ass Tommy made sure she lost her job.
Oh, yeah. And Tommy made sure that she lost her job before she even walked down those staircases. Right. She probably had to burst them for the ticket.
This is going to random side conversation. Does anyone else think that Group Captain Peter Townsend was just a pill? Like, he wasn't going to work out with Margaret any damn way?
He was a whiny bitch. I'm like, no wonder your wife left you. No, I'm sorry, that was me. But
Tommy never wanted them to work in the first place, because Tommy told him, you need to resign. Served as dead.
Wait, you broke up a little bit. What'd you say?
I said, Tommy never wanted him in the first place, because Tommy told him, the person you served is dead, so you don't even need to work here no more. Go home to your wife.
He did. Yeah, he said it.
And that was cold. I was like, damn, Tommy, you are my hero.
But how much of that was Tommy knowing that Peter and Margaret had taken up with each other?
Oh, Tommy be knowing. Tommy be knowing how.
He told him.
Yeah, Tommy.
And that's the person you enjoy the special relationship with is still with us in some sort.
Yeah, you can't have that many people around you and up your ass 24/7. People don't know about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But are you saying, do you think it wouldn't have worked given Margaret's temperament?
No.
Yeah, I'm saying it wouldn't have worked. And I think that because their, relationship was too taboo, that it became romanticized too much. Like, it wouldn't have worked out.
She would have gotten bored with him. I think the reason she was
she was
so into him because he was unattainable, because it was a thumb and a nose to the face of all the rules she had to follow. The minute he was truly free to be with her, it wouldn't have worked. Even if Elizabeth had broken the rules of the monarchy, said, go ahead and marry him, and you won't lose anything. You don't have to leave or anything like that. They would have been together a year tops before she was either stepping out on him or left him. And it's well known that, she liked to have her affairs in real life.
Well, her husband did too.
I'm not saying it was just her.
Oh, I cannot wait to get into Mr. Armstrong Jones.
I know.
And that awkward ass, okay, I don't know if you've gotten this far, Ejiro, that awkward ass sex scene. What the fuck was that?
Oh, I've watched all of it. And
I've seen. I mean, we can go ahead and go in on season 2.
Oh, no, we don't have time.
No,
we don't have time. We only have 10 minutes. No, but I'm just saying, I need the Crown to never do another sex scene again, because that shit was awkward as fuck.
Are you talking? Okay. Between the girl he was taking a picture of, the Jackie Chan, and then him, it was all too much. It was just too much.
Yeah.
Jackie Chan? You mean Jackie Kennedy?
No, Jackie Chan.
That was the name of they literally named that character Jackie Chan.
No, she's a real person. She is a real person. Just JACQUI.
Can we call her Jacqueline? Because I can't call her Jackie Chan without feeling racist. Can we just call her Jacqueline?
A couple broken hearts. I mean, supposedly women and men were very sad when he left the market. I don't understand why.
He never left the market. That's the point.
Any
other closing thoughts for season 1?
Okay. Question. So y'all remember during Princess Elizabeth's wedding to Philip, and Winston Churchill was like those 2 old puppet motherfuckers from Sesame Street.
Wow.
So was he really out there calling people Nazis audibly? Sidebar. Prince Philip's mother actually helped Jews get out of Germany, and she's actually buried in Israel. So sidebar.
Yes,
so I guess she made up for all the other sins of her other children.
Her trash ass kids.
Was Winston Churchill seriously up there doing that during the wedding?
Yeah. But I think one of the best lines ever is when Edward and his mother were together, and they brought up Prince Philip, and he said, "You mean the foundling?" She said, "Don't call him that." He said, "I would, but he doesn't have a name."
Oh,
listen, when Queen Mary was like, "Don't bring that woman's name up in my presence, and destroy what little respect I have left for you." I am paraphrasing, but that is ooh. I love white people shade. Well, actually, that wasn't shade. That was a shot to the chest. But ooh. She was so good.
Oh my gosh.
What did we think of Wallace? I mean,
I didn't like her. I wanted to punch her in her stupid face. I did not like her.
I like her outfits.
Her outfits were gorgeous.
You know what?
Like Wallace was gangster. She's like, "I've had 3 husbands. I can have 3 more. What y'all gonna do about it?" She didn't change. Wallace kept being Wallace throughout the whole thing. She manipulated Edward as much as she did, got what she wanted, and kept it moving. And she had her side affairs, too.
Yes, she did.
Oh, I love when, going back to Queen Mary, when she was, like, lying in bed, and her doctor was, like, giving her a checkup. And the doctor is like looking outside and he's like, "What are they doing out there?" I guess like the guards are doing a procession. And she's like, they're practicing. And he's like, practicing before. She's like, my funeral. And it was deadpan way.
It's like, well, that's morbid as
That
fuck.
was really tough, though. Like, I like that scene too, Ashanti, but I just thought, how rough is that on you to kind of know what's going to happen at your own service? Like,
they all have their funeral plans. Like,
they had to, because at one point,
when Princess Diana died, they pulled up, they used the Queen Mother's funeral plans for that.
And that was a big scandal. I remember that.
Because they all have the code names. So like when Elizabeth dies, it'll be London Bridge has fallen is the code, and they have one for each of the ones in line. But I guess I forgot where I read it. They were talking about the fact that they had to start doing it that way because at one point one royal died and they lost the body and the procession went off course, and it was just a whole bunch of shenanigans for this royal funeral.
What?
So they had
who body did they lose?
I forget which one. I have to go back and watch it. Read it. Ejiro, it was that day that I was avoiding doing a literature review, so I was doing all that research on it.
That day, I remember.
I was like, I don't feel like doing this literature review, so let me find out. So, but yeah, they lost a body or the procession went the wrong way, so it didn't wind up at the church on time, and the grave diggers were drunk, or the people that delivered the casket. It was a hot fucking mess. So ever since then, for each monarch or each one in the line of like royalty, they have like there's a code for it, and when the person dies, this is what goes out over the wire, so they then know to put the plans in place. But yeah, it was hilarious. If I find it, I'll send it to you. I'll have it ready for the next recording. We'll talk about it. Any other close?
Edward VIII.
What?
I bet you it was Edward VIII.
I think it might have been. Let me see.
Oh, I was just shooting from the hip because he was just such a character that I was like, you know what? He's lifetime that he probably didn't have a plan.
Okay, here it is. Found it. Until the 19th century, British royal funerals were poorly organized. At the funeral of Princess Charlotte in 1817, the undertakers were drunk. The Times described the funeral of King George IV in 1830 as ill-managed. This changed during the reign of Queen Victoria, who was obsessed with death when she started planning her own funeral in 1875, 26 years before she died. King George's phrase was Hyde Park Corner. And this was done to prevent Buckingham Palace switchboard operators from learning the news too soon. The plan for Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, code name Operation Tay Bridge, had been rehearsed for 22 years, and in 1997 was used as the basis for the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales. So they didn't lose a body, but apparently it was just all the funerals were hot-ass messes until they started doing these plans. So Tay Bridge is the Queen Mother. Operation Fourth Bridge is for Prince Philip. Operation Menai Bridge is for Prince Charles. So, yep.
I have a one quick question. It's just a shift. What do we think about the rivalry between Anthony Eden and Churchill? Because I rather enjoyed that, probably because I really like the actor who plays Anthony Eden.
Jeremy Northam.
Oh, I've been looking for years. So, he was sick. The man almost died, and he was still fighting.
Dude was pumping heroin in his veins. Like,
he's a very sickly man for a while.
Eden was on that shit.
Eden wanted something and did not know what he was asking for. Eden leapt before he looked. He was so smug before Churchill stepped down that I knew once he got it, he was going to fuck it up. And he did not disappoint in that realm. He absolutely fucked it up when he got it.
Absolutely fucked it up. But I'm still going to go back and watch his expression during episode 2 after Winston finished that speech, because he looked like he could just die.
Yes, he was swallowing his tongue. He was like, this rhetorical motherfucker.
I can't get rid of his ass. Damn.
Yeah. He's like always putting these fucking speeches and phrases and shit that'll last for the eons, and people gonna remember, can quote off the top of the dome, and god damn, he's good.
And then in the Fog episode,
like a friend.
Wait, in the Fog episode when they just knew they had him, he's like, fuck, I can't get rid of this motherfucker. Why?
He was
Yeah.
like,
Listen, I'm like, so that fog thing, so that really happened.
Yeah.
yeah.
And the Queen Elizabeth was so G'd up to go see her grandmama that she walked in the smog, this coal smog, and went to
100 yards.
But
and she's breathing that shit in the whole time.
that's the issue. It's not the distance. It's what
Like,
she's
you can
breathing
get
in.
black lung in those 200 yards.
That was the
That's
issue.
how bad it was.
Because that's
She had her
why
perspectives.
that's why the secretary's roommate was coughing up her lungs from having to go back and
Right.
forth to work in it.
Yeah, but Elizabeth got those good genes, those we ain't dying genes.
Unless we got to party ourselves to death
She really does.
in order to die genes. I still can't believe Margaret died before her mama too. Margaret
Yeah.
was
Same year.
70.
Within, yeah.
Yeah, so Margaret died at 70 in February, and then the Queen Mother died at the beginning of April.
Yeah.
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 So was that like, what, 2000?
2001.
2001.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I still crack jokes saying, like, Charles might not make it before Queen Elizabeth dies. Like, I know she's, set back her traveling schedule and then turned some things over to him. But I'm like, dang, it seemed like she's trying so fucking hard to outlive Charles right now.
It does.
Yeah, she's just plodding along. She's just plodding along, waiting for the Grim Reaper to catch up with her.
She's like,
I don't think she's gonna like reject him at the door. I mean,
think
if
the
things,
Reaper is afraid of her. The Grim Reaper's afraid.
I mean, worst case scenario, they can, God forbid, they can take her out like they did her grandpappy, King George V, because his doctor, he was already ill. Mm-hmm. His doctor gave him a fatal dose of morphine.
What?
Yeah, so he sped up his death because he didn't want like the common papers to have the news first. He wanted it to go out on the Times, which is like the prestigious conservative, broadside newspaper. So he essentially took it upon himself to, knock him off a little bit earlier so that he could get the news in to the press so it would go out in the morning.
Oh, okay.
The proper morning paper.
So he was already sick, is what you're saying. I thought
he was already sick.
I thought you said, well, I just want the king dead. So, and this is the paper I want to attend.
Well, that's kind of, I mean, he kind of helped him along.
Oh my God.
It was definitely physician assisted homicide.
Holy shit.
Because the king didn't ask for that shit.
Sorry, what?
Like, he didn't say, hey, knock me out so you can report this in the morning papers. That was the doctor's decision. What? That shit was murder, son.
Why am I laughing at the murder of the king? Why am I laughing at the murder of the king?
Tommy had some plans. I blame everything bad on Tommy.
Oh. Oh my gosh. Anything else?
This quote from Queen Mary, and it ropes around to the clip that you played, but this is like the centrality of Queen Elizabeth's role in life that has become increasingly more difficult to maintain as as history marches on, and we see this even now today because Charles cannot do any of this fuck shit. Or I guess maybe none of the royals can, but here's what she said. Let me do the full exchange. She said, Queen Elizabeth II said, "It doesn't feel right as head of state to do nothing." Queen Mary said, "It is exactly right." QE2 said, "Is it? Because surely doing nothing is no job at all." Queen Mary said, "To do nothing is the hardest job of all."
I remember that line. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And it will take every ounce of energy that you have. To be impartial is not natural, not human. People will always want you to smile or agree or frown. And the minute you do, you will have declared a position, a point of view. And that is the one thing as sovereign that you are not entitled to do.
Wow.
The less you do, the less you say or agree or smile. And QE2 said, or think or feel or breathe or exist. Queen Mary said, the better.
I remember that. I was like, shit.
Yep. That was after she walked those 200 yards in the fog to go see her grandmama.
But then we see, as we'll talk about in season 2, that's a problem. That's the very issue that people have with her.
Yeah. And here's another bar from Queen Mary, which goes back into their to their position in society. Here's what she said. Monarchy is God's sacred mission to grace and dignity. Monarchy is God's sacred mission to grace and dignify the earth, to give ordinary people an ideal to strive towards, an example of nobility and duty, to raise them in their wretched lives. Monarchy is a calling from God. That is why you are crowned in an abbey, not a government building. Why you are anointed, not appointed. It's an archbishop that puts the crown on your head, not a minister or public servant, which means that you are answerable to God in your duty, not the public. And boy, how different that is. Because if it weren't for Tony Blair in 1997, the monarchy would have been a wrap.
Yes.
Because for people that are younger and don't recall this, when Princess Diana died, there was a lot of bad blood between her and her ex-husband, the Prince of Wales, and then the royal family as a whole, because she kind of put them on blast as a stale, decrepit institution that didn't allow for individuality or personality or, she was doing her own thing. And she was out of the family. Like, she had the titular title of Princess of Wales, but she was no longer Her Royal Highness. So she had that, they gave her that title as a courtesy, but she no longer had the honor or distinction of that HRH. So her status was completely outside of the family. And a good deal of the public identified more with her. So when she died, the royal family was in between a rock and a hard place, because they were not going to treat the death of Diana as if she were a member of the royal family. She was going to be buried and treated as a commoner. And people weren't having that. And if it weren't for Tony Blair doing two things: one, saying that she was the queen of people's hearts, and two, getting the queen to make that national address, like leaving Scotland, because they were all in Edinburgh, and they stayed there a few days to give William and Harry a little bit of time. But if it weren't for them, if it weren't for Tony Blair getting her to do that and to decamp from Edinburgh, to go back to London and deal with this head on, and actually pull the Queen Mother's funeral plans to treat Diana with the respect that the people expected her to be, buried with, that royal family was done in 1997.
That's interesting. Yeah. I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He saved her. And she was none too happy with him either.
No.
Yeah,
and that's
she
why,
rose to the...
she rose to the motherfucking occasion, because off the top of my head, I remember saying that as I come to you not to, as your, as maybe not only your queen, but also as a grandmother. Man, look, like she kind of had to get the public together, because I think what was also lost of just the outpouring of emotion was, they did have to, look after William and Harry. And I'm only 3 months older than Harry. So we were the same age when this happened. And I was watching him like walk behind his mama's coffin, which was hard to do. And actually, weirdly enough, I was doing the same thing like 3 years later when my dad died, but neither here nor there. It's really, really interesting how they were like the most human as a family in that moment, trying to comfort those kids at that time, because I think the people were so distraught that just exposing them to that emotion so quick probably would have messed them up.
Yeah.
In a way that the public wouldn't have appreciated. They just wanted to see them, to like touch them, hold them, like kind of, mother them in a way. But because they're a motherfucking mob, they just would have killed them. So like they needed to, again, assert their need for privacy in an intensely public family moment. And like, honest to God, if the queen weren't the professional that she is, they wouldn't have made it.
But it's funny because Margaret felt that the queen went too far. There was some public statements or private made public that she felt that she did too much. That she's like, you don't have to nod, you don't need to bow or do whatever. However, she recognized Diana.
When the queen bowed her head, I don't think this Queen Elizabeth has never, not once in her white ass regnal life, ever bowed her head to anyone.
Exactly. And that was it.
Listen, Oscar-winning performance, whether she meant it or not, Oscar-winning performance. And, like, Queen Elizabeth II is like, she's an introvert, People don't know too much about her. So people tend to project a lot on her. But she's really just a tabula rasa. Like, she's whatever you paint her to be in that particular moment. So in the event where she breaks custom, either because no one expects it of her or would have thought she would do something, reveals a little bit of humanity, and that I think is actually her. I think we saw, or at least I saw, the Queen Elizabeth II, the human, actually bowing her head as a sign of respect, because she is really legitimately a good fucking person. The cynics can fight me. I don't really care. But for a woman who is so little on record with her own public thoughts, sometimes you have to go by gesture. No one in their lives ever saw that coming, and she did it. And she didn't have to speak another word. You just understood. Like, she really got the last word, and she didn't say anything.
Yeah. Right.
Like, Winston Churchill couldn't do that shit.
No, he's got too much pride to
ego.
Like,
that's not the role of the monarch. Sorry.
Yeah. So, like, it's kind of weird, because I know if I were British, I would be a Republican. A Republican in the sense that the prime minister is our head of state and our head of government. We don't need this royal family. They're really superfluous. They don't represent society as much as they try. They really are still separate and apart, and a part of like this really entrenched system in a hierarchical society that it's incredibly hard to break through. Like, they represent resistance to change because they keep it in place, this hierarchical order that I mean, there is still no black prime minister. As
barely any black MPs. What are you talking about?
Ashanti, we already did that documentary.
Actually,
you know that.
Going back to our DocuJunks review of
Will there ever be a black British prime minister?
Back to going in time in Brixton. I was surprised that they didn't really do much about the Windrush generation, but
that's what I was thinking. That's exactly what I thought when especially we were talking about empire. I mean, hopefully there'll be more when they get deeper into the 60s with civil rights and all the different issues that were happening there that mirrored the U.S. Nothing about Windrush. That was quite surprising.
Yeah. So the fact that, our system, the American system, it's deeply riddled with problems and still has problems of representation. Like, you could still come from nothing and grow up to be something. Whereas in the UK, that's much harder because you have the establishment that goes to all the right schools or the same schools. They're all from the same families or families that know each other well, having an extensive amount of money. And the fact that, if you're a British kid and your, grandparents were part of the Windrush, immigration to the UK and you help build modern society, and yet you're still barely represented in Parliament, let alone in the House of Lords, let alone as the, premier head of state, that's a problem.
Yeah, and if no one knows, I'm sure people might know or might not know, Windrush is really when you had all these people, particularly from the Caribbean, the West Indies, who, of course, were colonized, returning in a way, as some people I know call it, or going to the UK to kind of take on that promise. There have been some really good books that have been written about it. But this idea that, this was our land as well, the Queen was our queen, let's go to the UK, and all the resistance that they faced, obviously through racism. So, as Ashanti said, the establishment.
So let's touch on that on our next episode. We do have to wrap up. I'm so sorry. This was a great discussion, though, and we're going to be back with season 2, hopefully in the next few weeks. Right now, we're able to get Ejiro because she is stateside. Otherwise, she lives in the future. So we're going to have to work out how we're going to get her in on that next recording.
Okay.
But thank you, everyone.
Also, I will punctuate this by saying the monarchy should probably end with Queen Elizabeth II.
I would agree with that. And honestly, I think if you ask William, he wouldn't mind that. I don't think William or Harry would mind that at all.
Neither would I.
I would agree.
I don't think Diana's boys would mind at freaking all. So anyway, so we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.